So, is it just me or is it cold in here? Freezing. Freezing all morning. No, just freezing. I tend to do that frequently. So, extra credit. Due Saturday by 5 p.m. Okay, so please remember to do that. So today we're going to look at the rest of fruits and fruit parcel, and then we will open it up for going over the final exam. Okay, so we've been looking at fruits, and today in lab you will get to work through kind of like a dichotomous key of fruits as you dissect the fruits and examine them. And I think we left off right around here. So looking at when you say, you know, what is a fruit, it's really the ovary flower that developed into this fruit or dry fruit. And then sometimes there's additional flower parts that are involved in getting that fruit to be the way it is. So once that double fertilization event happens in the angiosperms and you get, you know, the egg fertilized fuses with the polar nuclei to create the endosperm. So as soon as that happens, then the ovary tissue starts to grow and develop into the fruit that will then surround the seeds and the embryo inside. So simple, aggregate, multiple are like the terms that you should know walking into the exam next Monday, by the way. So remember, the final exam is Monday at noon in here. Okay, and Emily and Olivia will be here as well. And so both lecture and lab session exams will be given in here. Okay. All right. So aggregate versus multiple. Aggregate, you're still talking about a single flower. It's just that the flower has a lot of ovaries inside that one flower. So this is an aggregate. Multiple means multiple flowers, multiple ovaries. So we're usually thinking of an inflorescence. Pineapple is a great example. Corn is a great example. And then the other idea is accessory. So if you want to accessorize your fruit, what that means is there's going to be something else besides just the ovary involved in the formation of that fruit. And so accessory fruits are examples of very often it's the receptacle, which is like the stalk of the like a flower stalk. The receptacle is like right beneath the ovary, the stalk tissue right beneath the ovary. And so strawberries and apples, really the bulk of what you're eating is receptacle tissue, really, that's morphed into that fruit. And then another wintergreen, they use the calyx, which is, the calyx is all the sepals. If you talk about all the sepals as the unit, then they start referring to the calyx. But it's basically just sepals involved in the fruit production. So here are some examples of a simple aggregate multiple accessory and some really good examples of each one of those. Okay, so please be comfortable with those ideas, simple aggregate accessory. And then today in lab, what you're going to do is work through this flowchart or dichotomy to look at fruit that you'll be examining, and you'll be cutting it open and looking inside, looking at where the seeds are. And so as far as like what do you need to know for the exam, it's more of the big picture ideas. So again, thinking about what is, so this box up here, they're talking about what's a simple fruit, using that. So it's kind of like the more broader classification here: simple fruit, aggregate, multiple, accessory. But we're not going to like give you a bunch of different fruit and ask you to tell us, you know, specifically what it is. That's not really what we're going for. All right. So, you know, you can easily get your hands on a dichotomy like this and use this as your working through, so we're not going to ask you to memorize all this. It's just the big picture idea, simple, aggregate, multiple, accessory, and then fleshy or dry. We need to know, some fruit is definitely fleshy, some is dry. We'll get into that a little bit more. And then here, we're going to also get into if it's a dry fruit, these two boxes here, it says pericarp dry at maturity. So remember, the pericarp is the exocarp, mesocarp, endocarp, all thinned out and fused together. Then we start calling it a pericarp. The pericarp are dry fruit. And then if it's a dry fruit, we ask, is it dehiscent or indehiscent? And I'll explain that in a little bit here. But this is the flow chart that you'll be working with. And then we are going to be providing you with many examples that will fit into this so you can see how it all gets laid out when you use that key. So palms, technically apples and pears fit into that, but again, I'm not going to say, what is a palm fruit? I'm not going to do that. So don't, get too worried about some of this. This is more just for your interest, because I'm hoping a lot of you have eaten a lot of these fruits before. And so now you get to know a little bit more about what you've been eating. So peaches and almonds and olives all fall into the drupe category, or sometimes they're just called stone fruits because their seeds are so big and very hard, of course. Cherries fit into that too. And then tomatoes, a lot of people, of course, would refer to that as a vegetable, but technically it's a fruit. It comes from a fertilized egg in a flower. And so that is a fruit. Of course, oranges, grapefruit, lemons, limes, they are actually called Hesperidium. And then the cucumber family have all kinds of lovely, again, a lot of people would say these are vegetables. Pumpkin, cucumber. The general people, the non-botany people out there would say those are all vegetables. But technically these are all fruits because they came from an egg in a flower that got fertilized. So kind of fun to think about that really so much of what you eat are really fruits, and there's relatively smaller amount of actual vegetables. Aggregate fruits, so again, it's a single flower. So the next time you're out berry picking in the mid to late summer, fresh raspberries off the plant, wild raspberries are delicious, especially if it's a nice sunny day and they've been heated up by the sunlight. But take a look at the flowers developing earlier in the summer, and you'll see that they're single flowers. They just have lots of female parts to them in the center, so lots of ovaries. And then the idea of a multiple fruit, pineapple, which we don't have growing around here in the wild, but we certainly have seen a lot of pineapple fruits at the grocery store. So each one of those, this is a big inflorescence that, so multiple flowers all clustered together. They get, all the eggs get fertilized. Okay, so dry fruits are a little weird to think about because most people would say, oh, those are vegetables. But dry fruit just means that, the fleshy and the outermost, so exocarp, mesocarp, endocarp, all thinned way down, fused together into this really thin, dry covering. And then they further classify those fruits by, are they dehiscent or indehiscent? And that is really looking at, so if you think about like peas in a pod, for example, they look at, does the seam of the pod break open and release the seed when the seeds are good to go, or does the whole thing kind of fall off the mother plant and they stay sealed? And so dehiscent means that they will break open, the seam of the pericarp will break open, and the seeds get released. So legumes are like peas, peanuts, beans. Okay, so legumes are a special group of plants that they have dehiscent dry fruits. They split along both parts of the seed. Look at it carefully. Indehiscent means that everything stays sealed up. You don't get any breaking open. And so they get shed from the mother plant all intact. Dandelion. Sure. Oh, we've all played with dandelions at some point in our life. Choose to do so because we're not kids anymore. Doesn't mean we can't have fun with them. So it's kind of weird to think, but when you look at the non-fluffy part of the dandelion and you follow that, so the fluffy parachute and then the stalk, and then you look at what's on the very tip, that's the dry fruit. And so it is indehiscent. That fruit stays intact, it's sealed as you blow away the dandelion on the parachute there. So legumes here, peas, beans, peanuts. So these will break open when the seeds are mature. So years ago, I got asked about peanuts. So when you eat peanuts in the shell, those are a good example of legumes. And I got asked one time, well, but is peanuts, peas in a shell, shelled peanut, but don't they grow in the ground? And I'm like, yeah, but it is a fruit. I know it's a fruit, but I've never actually seen a peanut plant. Never seen peanuts grow. And so I had to look that one up. And so those of you who have, it's the most bizarre thing I learned after investigating. So they do form flowers above ground. They form flowers. And then after pollination, what they do is they grow down and bury into the soil. Did you know that? I was like, what? I checked a couple of different sites just to make sure it was legitimate because it just felt wacky. But that, so they form above ground flowers, pollination happens, and then after that happens, they'll grow their flower stock, keep going, then they'll get into the ground, and then they'll develop the fruit, which is the shell that you break open. Yeah, so it kind of like, why? I mean, you think of all the plants and they don't do this. This is very unusual. And I still don't have like a really solid answer to that. Well, that's a really good idea, right? Maybe burying their precious fruits is a good idea because it keeps at least a lot of them from not being. Yeah, right. Because now it's in the soil, it's good to go, right? So yeah, I mean, those are excellent ideas, but I haven't, and maybe that's all true, so maybe it's, like predators, probably predators soil compared to above ground, but then again, bacteria and fungi, they could degrade it, so it's like, So, but when you eat shelled peanuts and you crack open the shell is the dried fruit. That's the pericarp that you're eating. And so, I've eaten many shelled peanuts over the years, and really what you're eating, the bulk of what you're eating is the cotyledons. The actual huge part of the peanut is the cotyledons. You're eating the seed leaves, and the embryo in there too. So, yeah, very bizarre on that, incredibly interesting. So, schizocarps, again, we're not going to ask you specifically, like, what's a schizocarp? We're not going to do that, but this is more for your interest if you've encountered some of these in your life already and we're wondering. And of course, the wonderful maple. So, the average person would just say, no, that's not a fruit. That's crazy. That's not a fruit, but it is. And then the appendage, the winged appendage, is just to help it flutter away mother plant. And hopefully you all have played with those many times already in your life too, and still do continue to do it because it's fun. So again, these are examples where it's really hard if you're not doing, people would just argue with you about it. So have some conversations with some non-botany people and see how it goes, but you can convince them. So again, lovely design to flutter away in the breeze and hopefully end up in an area suitable for that seed to germinate and grow. Siliques are another category. And again, they tend to split open. But again, I'm not going to ask you that specifically. Corn is fun. Here technically it's a dry fruit. Pericarp is very thin. It covers each kernel of the corn. Each kernel on that is a dry fruit. And so the R means it's receptacle tissue. So that's the stalk of the flower stalk. It's the end part right below the ovary. And then the F stands for fruit. So each kernel is a fruit. And then the silk is actually, that's the stigma and style of the female flower that connects to the ovary where the kernel will eventually fill up. If everything goes okay, once that egg gets fertilized, it will develop into that kernel or that piece of corn on the cob, so to speak. So very interesting plant. We have, as you recall from, we looked at teosinte, the wild relative of corn, and we've really shifted how it looks and its growth, its size, much bigger, the plant itself, as well as corn on the cob. And then we've looked at this idea already with strawberries, how each little seed on the strawberry technically is a dry fruit. So it's pericarp tissue, and then the seed is inside of that. So technically those seeds are really dry fruits. And then the red part that's nice and sweet, tasty, that's the receptacle that you're eating, the receptacle of the flower stalk. And so just really kind of different ways of, once you realize a little bit of this botany. And so I showed you this weeks and weeks ago when we were looking at hormone impact. And so each little seed, so to speak, is an achene, which is a type of dry fruit. And then milkweeds, if you get a chance to grow milkweeds for the butterflies, that would be awesome. Milkweeds are volatile, very obvious, they do form. And then if you open them up, they have a lot of hairy appendages to help them kind of flutter away. Capsules, lots of plants do that as well. Nuts, these are actually dry fruits. Acorns, they're dried fruits. Coconut, actually that's right in the word, so that's kind of easy, but coconut is actually a dry fruit. And then grains are, again, that's fruit. It's dried fruit. So all of the fancy word is caryopsis. I don't really use that in this class, but you would hear that. Other people often refer to the seeds and the fruits as caryopsis. So I think this is in your book. And again, we're not going to ask you the nitty-gritty details, but over on the left, the column on the left, the aggregate, multiple, and then like fleshy and dry, just knowing those definitions is a good idea. And I think it's continued on here. And then dehiscent or indehiscent, what do those mean? But again, we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty. A couple of other ideas, though, I wanted to mention to you is this. There's two kind of ideas. Parthenocarpic is one. So this is weird because you get fruit tissue to develop without pollination. So that's really bizarre because that's not normal. The normal thing is you get double fertilization to happen in the ovary with the egg and the polar nuclei. Once that happens, then you get fruit. This is a really weird case where you get fruits, but no pollination has happened, no seeds develop. So it's fruit tissue with no seeds. So now you're used to that with like seedless oranges, seedless grapes. I can't even buy. I tried to get grapes with seeds for this class lab today. Can't find them. So it's like, oh, I guess we're not getting grapes because otherwise it's not much use if you don't have the seeds in there to dissect and look at. So it can happen naturally. It's rare, but it can happen. You can kind of force the situation. You apply auxin hormone to the developing flower, you can get it to happen. So obviously there's hormonal control on this, but they still don't understand all the nuances of it, like how it happens naturally. It's kind of bizarre. So, you know, like the banana idea that we talked about the other day, you know, there's remnants, see where the seed should have been, but you know, you don't crunch into any seeds when you bite into a banana. So, um, as you can imagine, it's pretty big business if you can develop and grow and sell seedless fruit. We like that. We don't like that with seeds that we're eating our food. Although I take issue with seedless watermelon. I like the seeds in there. Brings me back to my childhood. Siblings and I in a contest of how far we could spit them. In summer. So I like the seeds in watermelon, but yeah, I get it. You know, we don't like chewing around and digging out seeds with most of our food. So it's big business. And so getting that to happen, they're looking at it very carefully, and I'm sure we're going to see more and more of that. Yeah. Yeah. Like once the tank, if the tank is not it covers pods or generators. Something in the soil. Oh, I wonder what that is. Thank you. Yeah, that's interesting. So that's a pretty that what that's saying is it's a I mean, this has been going on for thousands and millions of years where there's that trigger that has to happen in order for huh. Okay. Well, now I'm just even more curious about that. So I'll have to look at that over summer. I'll try to dig that out and figure that out. So um okay, and then the other idea I wanted to mention, so please know the difference between parthenocarpic and apomixis. Apomixis literally means apo or apomixis means when you see a in front of a science word, it means without. And then pomixis is dealing with the idea of mixing. So what that is trying to say is that you get these seeds, but it isn't because of a sperm fertilizing an egg. That's not what happens. So you get essentially these are like asexual seeds, almost like cloning themselves in a really weird way. And so you don't have true pollination occurring. Sperm and egg don't fuse, and yet you still get a seed. Again, very bizarre. And so basically they refer to them as asexual seeds. Well, once they figured out that this was happening, again, they got super excited about it because if you are like, say you come upon like the perfect corn plant, like this corn plant is just awesome. And I want to make acres and acres of this exact plant. Then if you can get them to go through apomixis and produce a bunch of asexual seeds, you'll get that plant over and over and over. You're guaranteed. And so it is that kind of situation. If you have like the perfect plant, I just want to make oodles of copies of this plant because I'll make money off of it. Then you would want this situation. And so again, they're really interested in, okay, how does this happen? Can we make it happen on purpose when we want it to? And so they're definitely looking at that. And dandelions are known to do that actually fairly frequently. And so they know it happens naturally. And so dandelions are getting studied for that. By the way, dandelions are super useful. Here I live in the city, and where I used to live in the neighborhood I used to live in, some of the neighbors really didn't care for my lawn practices because I didn't care about dandelions. I think they're an awesome native plant. And so, but people want that myself understand that. And so I would rarely mow, and so they fight us for, oh, your lawn's too tall and too many. And then I know like grumbling about, you know, the seeds from the dandelion are wafting into the neighbors. Now they have to deal with it. So like where I currently live, I have one neighbor on one side of me. And she's so cool and chill. She never yells at me for not mowing So dandelions, you can use every single part of them. Every single part, including the roots. I just had dandelion root tea the other day. You can eat the leaves, the flowers. You can extract really good products from them. So I'm going to, on purpose, grow dandelions in my backyard in a big above ground, massive pot. So blackberries do this naturally as well. And so again, they're just like, okay, if we can get this to happen naturally, this would be a great idea. And so looking at it, they're getting into it. And that story is to be continued. They'll, I'm sure, come up with some interesting ideas. So blackberries are known to do it. Gamma grass, which is a wild grass and is distantly related to corn. Corn is a huge commodity crop. So they're really looking at gamma grass to see if they can somehow figure this out and then do it to the current modern corn that we have in production. Okay, so then another big idea I want you to think about is once the fruit gets made, no matter if it's fleshy or dry, then usually you want that seed to get somewhere new, away from the mother plant, new habitat where it can sprout and grow. Obviously, if it's a nice fleshy fruit, there's a lot of organisms that are going to want that and want to eat it. And then, of course, once the seeds go through the digestive tract and get pooped out somewhere, they hopefully will germinate and grow. So if you want another organism to come by and grab that fruit, often it needs to be very flashy, different color than green. You want it to stand out from the green leaves. And so make it red. It's often very red. And they often change color. So they'll start out like, bananas turn off green. That's a visual. I'm not done yet. Apples, a lot of apples do that too. And then once they turn red, usually what that's telling the disperser organism is that, okay, everything's good to go. It's going to be sweet. I can come along and eat it. And so getting the attention of different dispersers, again, thinking along the lines of how we were talking about pollination strategies. It's kind of the same idea with fruit dispersing. You want to catch the eye of the organism that's going to be taking that fruit and eating it and depositing the seed somewhere else. And so, and then of course, there are other mechanisms. It doesn't always have to be an organism that you're trying to get the attention of. It could just be wind. Wind can often be a very good strategy. And so all of these pretty much looking at wind ideas, the lovely dandelion. So there's so at the bottom there, that's the dried fruit, that little tiny thing that you often don't even pay attention to because it's not very flashy, but that's the dried fruit. So again, wind pollination, especially for dry fruit like this, pretty good strategy. Here you have ideas of some kind of attachment mechanism. Velcro was actually designed off of this. So when you look at some of these up close under the microscope, very effective mechanisms for attaching onto your pants leg or socks or your dog's feathers on their legs. And so good strategy. The fruit gets taken away and then it'll drop off. This one here looks pretty nasty, the unicorn plant. I saw video footage of an elephant stepping on it, and then the elephant kept walking and it stayed in the elephant's foot for several, 20, 30 yards, and then it dropped off. So kind of an effective strategy. It looks kind of nasty, but here, this is a person's foot wearing a sandal, looks like a Birkenstock sandal, and all the different burrs on there. So again, Velcro, the guy who invented Velcro, that was his inspiration. Man, can you imagine if we had invented Velcro? We'd be on the beach right now, drinking a margarita. So, but lovely, and that's getting to be a really popular area of scientific study right now, this biomimicry. They're really getting into organism nature. Like, yeah. So they are starting to look at this more carefully in all kinds of different disciplines, using what's out there naturally and learning from it, and then seeing if we can use that to for good. This is a mistletoe fruit. Eats it, and then the video, if this video footage works, you should watch it for some stress relief laughter. because it's in the note section. That's the mistletoe bird, and the Sir David Attenborough video I think is best. But they show the bird eating it on the tree. So mistletoe is a parasite. It parasitizes trees. And then the question is, well, how does it get up in the trees? And this is how it gets up in the trees, because the bird will eat the fruit, and then as it's pooping out the seed is super viscous. There's a covering that's really viscous and slimy. So it sticks, like it comes out of the bird's butt, but won't release. And so they show the bird moving its butt and trying to wipe its butt on the branch. And it's just hilarious. And then finally he wipes it off onto the branch. And then the seed germinates, stuck to the branch. Seed germinates and plugs in its root right into the tree. So in just a brilliant strategy by the plant to enlist this bird. The poor bird's like, would you get out of my butt? You know, and it finally gets released. Yeah, so good laughter. Watch that video when you get a chance. So lots of interesting strategies out there. Plants are amazing. Again, looking at, wouldn't want to step on that, but that would be an effective way to get stuck in a hoof or a paw and then get transferred. Erodium is amazing. Again, if you want to watch this short video clip when you're studying it, as you can see that kind of corkscrew pattern, it like drills in to the soil with wetting and drying action of the corkscrew portion. Wetting and drying causes it to actually rotate, relax, and it literally drills into the soil. It's amazing. So, and they are looking at, I just saw a video where they're trying to design like other seeds. They're trying to create a covering of some seeds, because a lot of seeds get, when you go plant like huge acres of crops, they'll do it via plane, where the plane flies over and they'll drop the seed. And so they're trying to create a lot of different seeds to have this kind of mechanism where they can have this somehow attached to it. They're creating like a bioplastic type thing that they're covering the seed with, so that when they drop it, this action of that screwing into the ground will make it that much more effective. So again, biomimicry, learning from this in order to improve crop production and success of planting the seed and actually getting it to land deep enough into the soil and grow. Bananas, they're technically not a tree. And they usually grow up from the rhizome. I've had students ask me about that in the past, so I just put this in here. And so, by the way, the bananas that we currently eat are different from what your grandparents ate. There's been serious, especially fungal and viruses that have attacked banana plantations over the years. So, and they're scared about our current one. They think that one's on its way out as well. So they're constantly trying to come up with new banana varieties that will survive attack. Okay, so, and don't forget. All right, so this is the end of the material for the final exam. So now I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the plan. So it is start with the material on the seedless vascular plants and go forward. So I think that, well, let me pull up the seedless vascular plants so I can show you, remind you of a few things. Well, let me do it this way. I'm going to stop share and do a different share. Let's see if I do it this way. Okay, so this is a slide set from the seedless vascular plants. So remember, I will be asking with the seedless vascular plants, you know, that last slide had the phylum name. So please remember to know who belongs into which phylum. So know the phylum names. 'cause I'll be referring to that in the multiple choice question. And then, you know, again, we were looking at the life cycle in general of some of these seedless vascular plants. So, you know, it's kind of like, okay, thinking about the gametophyte versus the sporophyte. And, you know, now with the seedless vascular plants, it's a big shift compared to the bryophytes before them, because now we see the sporophyte dominating. And then that just keeps going. Gymnosperms, that's the sporophyte dominates. Angiosperms, sporophyte dominates. Right, so we got sporophyte. More points toward one than the other. Probably more on the angiosperm, but not by a huge amount, I don't think. I'll double check that, but yeah, I think it's safe to say that there's, in terms of amount of points, I'm pretty sure angiosperm, and then gymnosperm, and then seedless vascular plant. Because the angiosperms, I'm including in that flowers and fruits. So that's why I'm thinking it's skewed that way, because I will be talking about flowers and fruits as well. But yeah, so are there any questions on this slide set with the seedless vascular plant? Clarification you're looking over? Or if you're wondering if I'm going to ask something, or like what level of detail. Yeah. Yes. Yes. So the only thing about bryophytes that I might ask, which actually isn't showing up in this slide set directly, but the gymnosperm, like this slide here, which is looks like it's slide 9. Oops, what happened there? That's not what I wanted. There. So this, or no, where is it? The one before it? There it is. This I'd like you to know about the bryophytes, in the sense that both the bryophytes and the seedless vascular plants, they're showing that the spores are getting released. And the reason I'm like really hammering that point home is that then when we shift into the gymnosperms, those spores aren't released. Same with the angiosperms, especially with the mother megagametophyte. So the megagametophyte stays on the plant. So that's a big, big shift. Trying to think. I think in the homework assignment that I gave on seedless vascular plants, some of you missed the true false question. It's probably gonna show up on the final. First, actually beat out the gymnosperms. So angiosperms are number 1. Number of species on the planet, angiosperms. Second is sperm. Gymnosperms don't beat them out. So a lot of people just immediately assume gymnosperms are next in line. They're not. It's the ferns. Ferns are amazing. What else? Let me go back to this. No, not that. So seedless vascular plants. Anything else on that slide set? Oops, this is gymnos. Let me go back to seedless. Sorry. There we go. Seedless. So, you know, knowing the different groups that we covered, the basic overall life cycle of the alternation of generations, you know, being again familiar with, luckily a lot of the terms are the same. Yes. On that, so sphagnum peat moss is when you say that, it's the growing, living peat moss you find in a bog. And then dried peat moss is something you can actually burn. Like that's burnable, and it's a source of fuel. Yeah. And then cushion moss is commonly actually used for cushion. Yes, it's very famous. Sphagnum, yeah, like sphagnum. The living sphagnum is very antiseptic in its chemistry. Yeah. I see another hand up. Yeah. Good question. So, okay. So I would like you to know. Whoops. Know so protosteel is the top left. Please know that. Protosteel is ancient. Some vascular plants have that where the vascular tissue is dead center. And then eusteel is where it's a ring. Well, yeah, saphanosteel. So yeah, please know protosteel. I think saphanosteel might show up either in lecture or lab. So those two main groups for the seedless vascular plants, protosteel and saphanosteel. And then the eusteel is really more with once you get into the end, get that. Yes. So I do have some visuals in the lecture portion. Some of it's labeling, like label this, some of it's drawings, because sometimes drawings are just easier to show more clearly what's happening. I might have cross-section of some of the stuff you've seen in lab showing up there. But yeah, there's gonna be a fair bit of labeling. I'll be asking you, label this, label that, with, you know, the key provided, you just drag and drop into the, so, you know, flower anatomy, fruit anatomy, some parts of the, like seed anatomy, don't be surprised about that either. Yeah, so I still have to go through. Yeah, and I'll make an announcement. So I just haven't had a chance to sit down and do that. Usually it works to your favor, to be honest, if I wait till the end of the semester, then I get, I'm just like, oh, you know, I get more lenient, let's just say that. Oh yeah, I'll throw that one out, you know, so it usually works to your favor. I've noticed that over the years. So anyways, but yes, I'll send it out an announcement. Anything else on seedless vascular plants? Yeah. Okay, and then we got into the gymnosperms and looked at some big shifts going on their strategy because they don't release those spores anymore. They retain, especially the megaspores. Thinking about that. So looking at the cone tissue and that the megasporangium is in there, but you really have a real big shift in the sense that instead of having a lot of megaspores, you just have one megaspore mother cell. So the gymnosperms really reduced the female spores, the megaspores. We're going to devote it down to just one. We're going to take really good care of that. And then that megaspore mother cell goes through meiosis and produces 4. Do all 4 survive? Where is that picture? So megaspore mother cell, meiosis, and it's not 4 cells, but 3 die out. And you're left with one functional megaspore. And then that very precious functional megaspore will go through lots of growth and development to become the megagametophyte. So please, I will be asking about this. These slides here, looking at this process. It's a big deal because it's a big shift from what we just talked about with the seedless vascular plants and how they do their strategies. And then the, don't be surprised, like, again, labeling the anatomy of the ovule. That's a really important concept I will be asking about. Questions on, yes. Yeah, I went through it in lecture because it's just pretty amazing how delayed everything is. It's not so cut and dried as what most people think. But the 18-month number is a good one to know about, and just to know that it's got this um, process. But I'm not going to ask like 3 months after pollination what happens. I'm not going to do that. But it's just fun to think about how it's not so cut and dried. And 18 months is a good one. So again, if we want you to do some kind of labeling or identification, we would either give you a really, really, really good slide prep or a drawing of it so that it's really clear. But having said that, remember as you're taking the exam to ask questions if you're unclear. So, yes, yep, that's where the pollen will get put in to place there and then get brought in. So you're actually seeing that on this slide 26, where they actually caught. Why is it so delayed? It's really weird. So here you're actually seeing pollen grains coming into the micropyle, and with the gymnosperms, that's still the megaspore mother cell that is in there. There's no megagametophyte yet. It's like really delayed. The pollen gets there and like, okay, I did my job. Did you get going? Then the megaspore mother cell goes, oh, all right, I'll produce 4 cells. It's 3 die off, 1's left, and then that one grows and divides and forms. Eventually, and then the pollen grain and on with fertilization. Other questions of gymnos? What are we looking at with that seed? Slide 32. So the green part is the embryo. What's the red part? It's not endosperm. Pardon? Yeah, it's the megagametophyte tissue, which is weird. Most people, we're just so, everyone talks about angiosperm seeds, and angiosperm seeds have endosperm. Many seeds do of the end. Gymnosperm, though, that's not endosperm. That's not how it happens. It's the megagametophyte that's going to provide that nutrition. Other questions on gymnos? Basic cone anatomy, the male cone, the female cone, just thinking about the basic anatomy. Know a little bit about pollen grains, both in the gymnosperms and the angiosperms. Pollen grains, when you look at where is it? Slide 19, pollen grains. In gymnos, it's different than what we see in angiosperms. They actually have 4 cells. 4 cells that make up. So when it's shed, it's 2 prothallus cells, tube cell, generative cell. Angiosperms, they go down to 2. There's only 2 cells that make up the pollen grain. Gymnos, it's 4, and there's no sperm yet. So they're both considered immature when they get shed. Both angio and gymno pollen are immature, and then eventually you'll get the sperm. Both. Other questions? Yes. See, there might be something on like knowing where the endosperm is versus the cotyledons but not the nitty gritty. Seed coat, oh, I don't know if they're gonna, I don't think I have anything like that. I'm trying to think it's a lab. I don't think they're gonna have it. Other questions? Yes. Yes, it'll be a separate lecture exam, and then you'll get all the way out of that, go back to take the other, whichever one you do first. All the way out, it's out. Okay, so I will be checking my email frequently over the weekend as well, so if something last minute comes up, remember to do the extra credit on angiosperms, it's due Saturday by 5 p.m. Please do that, and I'll release the board. Those assignments I've been giving you are good study tools, okay? And then send me an email if you have last minute questions.
So we have to do this vascular assignment. Is there any way you still be able to look that up?